Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Volatility Box Report for November 20th, 2019. We are TOSindicators.com, home of the Volatility Box. For today's trading, we'll discuss some trades that set up in the Russell futures, and this was using our conservative volatility box, as well as a trade in the coppers futures, and this was using our aggressive volatility box. Now, this trade, we actually had some more trades that set up in the S&P, which we'll talk about, but this was off of our aggressive volatility box when we had news that the potential China trade deal may not happen through the end of this year, which then brought the markets down lower. Now, if you're a bit more aggressive, we've talked about this a few different times, how you can use the dynamic RSI colored candles alongside that aggressive volatility box for some more aggressive entries. That's exactly what this guy was in the S&P. And so we'll quickly go over that, but using both our trade plan rules along with just being a bit more conservative, this was then not a valid entry for us. And so the two trades that set up were in the Russell and the copper, which we'll discuss today. So tomorrow on the calendar, we don't really see anything that calls for our attention, or at least anything that calls for us to be naturally more conservative from the get-go. And so we'll continue to use our trade plan rules, where we look at that first hour test and then make our decision on which volatility box to use, which at least today seemed to work out pretty well for us. And then finally, one thing to call out is for those of you that downloaded the MTF DMI indicator, there were some updates that have been made to this. There's some updates that will continue to be made to this. And so for those of you that are listening, I would recommend just checking the website to see in the update notes whether or not the indicator has been updated. A few bugs have been fixed as of the update right now after this video is up, but there's a few more enhancements that I think I'd like to add. And so those will be added either over the course of tomorrow or hopefully by Friday. And you should notice that in the code update header, you'll see what the date is. So anything after 11:20, and then if there's any updates made tomorrow or on the 22nd, then that will be in the code header as well. So just keep an eye out for that if you are using the MTF DMI indicator. We fixed things like the labels that don't show up correctly, along with taking out things like the ATR condition, which I'm not sure really added a whole lot of value, but that's something that we're testing. And if it does add value, then we'll go ahead and add this back in. But for the time being, the ATR condition has been removed. Now, if we look at our charts, we'll start with the S&P, and this is that trade that we talked about was a bit more aggressive. So we had news come out of that trade deal potentially not happening, and the S&P just tanked, right? And so lucky for us, this happened towards the edge of the hour, where already we're switching on to our conservative volatility box, given that this was a red folder event on Forex Factory, and per our trade plan rules, and that's where we say if you're a bit more aggressive, then that lets you catch this wick today. But if you're following the trade plan, then a red folder event, aka a high impact event, lets you know that you should be switching on over to the conservative volatility box, where this entry didn't then set up in that subsequent hour. However, if you are a bit more aggressive, we talked about this in yesterday's video, how you could use a 3-minute chart to help you time some of these reversals, especially using our aggressive volatility box. And we see that worked just exactly like we described, right? We went from red to orange to yellow, and this yellow candle is then your confirmation that you're ready to get in. And then we had a retest once again of our level, giving you the opportunity to get back in and then participate in this really nice move up in the S&P. And this is where I think it comes back to recognizing that trading is more of an art. And there are plenty of times that we treat it as a science, and that's why our rules kept us out of this trade. But there's also those of you that in your world of science, you take to the art of trading in a slightly more aggressive manner, and that's how I would really look at this, where this is a justified trade for you, but you're repeating the same process every single time, right? And that's what makes it scientific. But for the actual art component, this is then a valid trade for you because you are a more aggressive trader, and that's really something you need to decide for yourself. Now, in the Russell, something different happened, where once we had the sign that the volatility box was puking, and that, according to our trade plan, is our switch on over to the conservative volatility box. And that is where we actually did have an entry that set up. And so in the conservative volatility box, we had price fall perfectly in before reversing. And this is really sort of the picture perfect example of why the volatility box, our trade plan, is all just so powerful and how everything comes together, right? Our trade plan told us to switch on over to the conservative volatility box. Sure, it cost us that missed trade on the S&P, but it also gave you this almost picture perfect entry in the Russell futures, which gave you both a T1 and a T2. And so that was a beautiful trade. And then we see that right after we hit what would have been our volatility box clouds for the hour in which we had the reversal, price then really started to fluctuate. And from that point, we've once again started to fall down lower. And then finally, we said we had a trade in the copper futures. And so if we switch back to our aggressive volatility box, that trade came at the same exact time when the price action was plummeting for all the indices, right? And so here, once again, copper followed very similar to the S&P market, where we actually breached our volatility box towards the end of the hour. Here, however, we see using our aggressive volatility box, we did have this equal and opposite reaction. And so the edge of the hour, while not a valid trade, does give us free information. And this is telling us that we're respecting the aggressive volatility box. And this is that first sign in which you have that reversal switch. We go from red to orange to red to green. And in this green candle move up is really where you had your opportunity to get your entry at that same price. However, we've talked about this, right? It's one story to get your entry filled on the way down, and then another where you're getting your entry filled on the way up. And I think that is sort of where these RSI candles can help you get that confirmation that we're looking for. So once again, today in our trades, we had two total trades that set up in the Russell futures and the copper futures according to our trade plan. Also, one additional S&P futures trade if you are a bit more aggressive. But really, with these two trades, you still had a really nice P&L day, positive $992.50. And I think that's a really nice way to close out a day, 100%. So really kept up our probability end of that trade, as well as had some nice winners. I hope you guys enjoyed trading today's volatility activity that we saw in the market. The volatility box did help you in terms of finding entries, as well as just understanding context in really all of the markets that we care to look at today, while it only set up entries for us in a handful of markets. With that, we'll look forward to trading tomorrow's Thursday activity, see if we get those crazy Thursdays, see if that volatility persists, and just be a little bit more cautious, but follow our trade plan rules and know if we're being aggressive, accepting that risk ahead of time. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you in tomorrow's nightly update.